fulfillment of prophetic curses against the Jews for disobedience. The prophecy stated that, however, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. Deuteronomy 28:15. In Deuteronomy 28, God warned Israel that if they do not keep his commandments, they would experience the curses mentioned. Both Israel and the Jews sinned, and they were exiled from the Promised Land and scattered across Syria, Iran, Turkey, and Africa. The Jews were later sent as slaves to the Americas and Europe. The Jews are currently suffering the brunt of prophesied curses against them without knowing it. Before we go any farther, we must first define what the word curse means. What is the definition of curse? Curse is defined as when a solemn or grave utterance intended to invoke a supernatural power to inflict harm and punishment on a person or a people. This simply means that God's supernatural curses are imposed on the Israelites and the Jews as a group of people to punish them for disobedience. The prophecies stated that, "You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. You will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. You will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth." According to the prophecies, the Jews will become nuisance, irritants, and a burden in the countries where they are scattered. Many countries prefer Jewish-free societies, which explains the segregation policies against black people in the Americas, Europe, and even in some African countries. Jews in these countries were isolated from white groups. That is why there are separate communities for Negroes, a derogatory word for black people, such as projects houses, schools, playgrounds, wages, buses, restrooms, and so on. Although there are some exceptional, honest and God-fearing Jews in Africa and in the diaspora. But majority of them are involved with robbery, internet fraud, drug trafficking, prostitution, gangsterism, human trafficking, rituals, corruption, etc. We don't have to live abroad to see the fulfillment of these prophecies, and this is why most countries refuse to issue visas to African Jews. The prophecy stated that, "The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, in all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do." Deuteronomy 28:20. The keywords here are cursing, confused or vexation, and rebuke. The Jews will endure constant injustices, confusion, complaints, and anger in all their activities because of the government's constant injustice against them in all the nations to which they are scattered. The prophecy says, "You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her." This prophecy was fulfilled during the slave trade era in the Americas and Europe. The Jewish ladies were frequently raped by their slave masters. The prophecy stated that, "You will build a house, but you will not live in it." The Jews were cursed to build a house that they would never live in. This prophecy was fulfilled when the slaves built the American governmental building known as the White House. The term "build a house" refers to the White House of American government. The White House is the official residence and workplace of the American president. The White House was built in the late 17th century by the transatlantic slaves. Several books have been written to confirm this fact, and one of such books is A House Built by Slaves. The phrase "you will not live in it" refers to a curse that Jews will never rule America. Some of you might say this prophecy failed because an African American ruled America for 8 years. Former US President Barack Obama is an African American, but he's not a Jew. Barack Obama has dual citizenship of Kenya and America. Barack Hussein Obama Sr., former US President's father, is a Kenyan. And Kenyans are Africans and descendants of Ham. According to prophecy, no Jew will ever live inside the White House as the President of America. In other words, the Jews will never rule America. Kenya and East African countries were also involved with foreign slave trade, but theirs was different. The prophecy stated that, "Woe to the land of whirring wings along the rivers of Cush. Isaiah 18, 1-2. According to prophecy, the nation that will carry the Jews into captivity would come from across the river of Cush, which is the Atlantic Ocean. Cush was the ancient name for Ethiopian. The East African countries were involved with the Arab slave trade, and the route to the Arabian Peninsula was through the Indian Ocean. And they were carried through the Indian Ocean to the Arabian Peninsula. The Atlantic Ocean was formerly known as the Ethiopian Ocean. The prophecy stated that, "You will plant a vineyard, but you will not even begin to enjoy its fruit." The prophecy also stated that, "A people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all your days." Deuteronomy 28, 30 and 33. The Jews worked in several plantations across the Americas, but they were not allowed to eat from the farm produce. Alauda gave us great insight into what life was like during slavery. Alauda wrote that, "While I was in this plantation, the gentleman, to whom I suppose the estate belonged, being unwell, I was one day sent to his dwelling house to fan him. When I came into the room where he was, I was very much affrighted at some things I saw, and the more so as I had seen a black woman slave as I came through the house, who was cooking the dinner, and the poor creature was cruelly loaded with various kinds of iron machines. She had one particularly on her head, which locked her mouth so fast that she could scarcely speak, and could not eat nor drink. I was much astonished and shocked at this contrivance, which I afterwards learned was called the iron muzzle." According to history and Alauda, most slaves worked on plantations, while others, particularly female slaves, worked in houses and kitchens, for the purpose of cooking and cleaning. Alauda explained that he saw a female slave cooking in the kitchen. Her face was covered with iron muzzle to prevent her from eating or drinking. The iron muzzles were used to cover slaves' mouths or entire faces, to prevent them from eating food from the master's kitchen or plantations. The prophecy stated that, "The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone." We have already learned how the Jews worshipped idol gods of iron, fire, thunder, and marine spirit before they were captured and taken abroad as slaves. The Jews continue to practice idolatry throughout the countries where they were scattered, including Africa, Cuba, Brazil, and America. The prophecy stated that, "You will become a thing of horror, a byword and an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you." We have also learned how the Jews are referred to as nigger, especially the Jews abroad. The prophecy stated that, "The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail." The Jewish communities in the Americas have the lowest economic value and little or no assets that they can identify as their own. One of the biggest problems facing the Jewish people is their inability to borrow money from the government or banks to make significant progress. The American financial system is designed to frustrate the Jews from acquiring loans to help them build large business empires. The graph from American Institute for Policy Studies exposed the double standard in the American government. The first graph showed the chances that the black communities have if they were to collect government or bank loans. From the three families, we see that the Jewish families have lesser chances of getting loans from the bank or government. This is why it's difficult for the Jews to have any meaningful businesses in America. This prophecy is also being fulfilled against the Jews that settled in Nigeria. The prophecy stated that, "The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will be the head, but you will be the tail." The Jews who settled in southern Nigeria have endured a great deal of injustice from northerners, the Egyptians they coexist with. The lopsided ministerial appointments by the Nigerian government, as well as having stronghold to power, are prophecies being fulfilled against the Jews. This injustice inflicted by the northerners, the ancient Egyptians, is being fulfilled as a prophetic curse on the Jews. The prophecy stated that, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity, 48 therefore in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. We have already learned about these prophecies. The Jews were captured, and they were chained around their necks before being shipped as slaves to America, where they suffered constant desperation and hunger. Lauder wrote that, it was very common in several of the islands, particularly in St. Kitts, for the slaves to be branded with the initial letters of their master's name, and a load of heavy iron hooks hung about their necks. Again, Lauder confirmed that these prophecies have been fulfilled. The Jews were not only chained with iron yokes around their necks, but hot irons were also used to engrave their bodies with their slave masters' names. The prophecy stated that, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand, a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. We have also learned about this prophecy. America is the fierce-looking nation swooping down like an eagle. The prophecy stated that, they, Americans, will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine or olive oil, nor any calves of your herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. These prophecies have dual fulfillments. These prophecies came true when the Americans invaded West Africa. When the Americans invaded West Africa, it was expected that the Jews would fight to defend themselves, but America was able to defeat them due to superior weapons. When the Americans invaded West Africa, they attacked villages, killed several Jews, and possibly destroyed crops and livestock. Even today, we still witness these prophecies are being fulfilled in the lives of Jews in Nigeria. The Nigerian Biafra War of 1967-1970 also fulfilled this prophecy. The war was between the Nigerian government and the tribe of Judah, also known as the Eastern and South people of Nigeria. The war lasted for 3 years. Although the war's estimated death toll was at 3 million, the tribe of Judah suffered the greatest loss, with an estimated 2 million deaths and injured. The war began mainly in the eastern and south regions, and it ended in Ondo State, the territory of the Levites. The Nigerian army displaced the Jews from their homes and their cities were destroyed. The Jewish women and children fled into the forests for safety. The Jewish men and boys were drafted into the Biafran army. Throughout the war, the Jews suffered severe hunger and malnutrition. The prophecies stated that, they will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you. Even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his own brother or the wife he loves or his surviving children, and he will not give to one of them any of the flesh of his children that he is eating. It will be all he has left because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of all your cities. Some people believe this prophecy was fulfilled in the event described in 2 Kings 6:24-30, in which 2 Israelite women proposed eating their children during a famine in Israel when Assyrian soldiers lay siege to Samaria. This one case did not fulfill the prophecy because the 2 women only ate 1 child. What had happened was that there was a famine in Israel, and the women were hungry because they didn't have enough money to buy food, and everything was very expensive. This is not the situation that the prophecy described to us. The prophecy stated that, because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters. This verse alone nullified the idea that this prophecy was fulfilled in 2 Kings chapter 6. The prophecy stated that, They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Before we continue, we must make some clarification on what land Moses was referring to here. First, it's important to say that the cities throughout the land mentioned here does not refer to cities in the land of Israel. We notice that Moses described the promised land of Israel with the phrase, "You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess," in verses 63. Cities throughout the land refers to the future cities that the Jews would be scattered to. This prophecy was fulfilled during the Nigerian Biafra War, in the cities where the Jews of Judah were scattered. There have been several personal accounts from those who witnessed and shared terrifying details of what happened during the Nigerian Biafra War. In 2020, the Punch newspaper had an interview with Dr. Andy Ahim, a 65-year-old director of information at Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University and a former Biafran soldier. In this interview, Dr. Ahim revealed how he was drafted into the Biafran army at the age of 14, as well as shocking first-hand accounts of what individuals had to do to survive the war. Dr. Ahim said, "There was no food. It was such that for 3 days at times, you might not have food. Then the Biafran army suddenly discovered that things like the lizard had enough protein, so it was good meat. We ate avocados with the seeds inside and all kinds of things like locusts and lizards to keep us alive." Dr. Ahim revealed that the Jews had no food to eat, so they resorted to eating lizards, locusts, fruits and all kinds of leaves to survive. Dr. Ahim said, "Vultures virtually disappeared from Biafra. And cattle egrets, popularly known as leke leke, also completely disappeared. Why were there no vultures and leke leke in Biafra lands? The only obvious conclusion is that the Jews of Judah ate vultures, leke lekes, lizards, and other reptilian animals that came within their reach." Dr. Ahim said, "The first instinct in man is that of survival. In fact, some communities ate human beings. They would go to the front and harvest the dead and eat. The war zone would have been a perfect hunting place for vultures and leke lekes because of the abundance of dead bodies, but none could be found because the Jews ate them all. No quantity of fruits, vultures, leke leke, lizards, or locusts would be sufficient to feed the nearly 15 million displaced and desperate people struggling for survival. To survive, Jews of Judah had to eat dead people." It's interesting that Dr. Ahim said that some communities ate human beings. They would go to the front and harvest the dead and eat. It is also interesting that the prophecy stated that, "You will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you." Dr. Ahim explained that some Jewish communities went to the war fronts, probably at night, to retrieve dead bodies of soldiers and civilians to eat them. The dead bodies collected from the war front and eaten by these communities were the bodies of their fellow Biafrans, their sons and daughters as prophesied. The war was severe in Ondo and Edo states, which are Levites' Jewish territories. There was no report of people being eaten during the war, but there have been multiple accounts of cannibalism among Western Nigerians. Cannibalism is still practiced in southern Nigeria's Jewish communities. Some Jews practice cannibalism as a way of life. It's important to note that the victims of cannibalism in southern Nigeria are Jews, their own children, not foreigners. Levi nations such as Liberia, Sierra Leone and Ivory Coast were also involved with great wars and with huge numbers of deaths. Tribe of Benjamin nations such as Angola and Zaire also suffered great wars and with huge numbers of deaths. Liberian War had over 250,000 deaths. Sierra Leone War had 70,000 deaths. Ivory Coast War had 4,000 deaths. Angola War had 800,000 deaths. Zaire War had 12.5 million deaths. In July 2018, UN human rights experts reported incidents of rape and cannibalism during the Zaire, now known as Congo Republic, war. It reported that some witnesses recalled seeing people cutting up, cooking and eating human flesh, including penises cut from men who were still alive and from corpses, especially FARDC, and drinking human blood. Congo's human rights minister Marie-Ange Mushobekwa. Although the transatlantic slave trade was officially abolished in the late 18th century, but it also resulted in the creation of a new system of slavery, an indirect slave trade. In his book The Scramble for Africa, Thomas Pakenham detailed how colonialism indirectly enslaved the whole African continent, including Jewish nations. Through colonization, Europeans looted natural resources and rigged elections for the preferred leaders in African nations. America and the United Nations are indirectly enslaving Jews in Africa and abroad. Americans employ both corrupt Jews and foreigners to carry out the destructive agendas. Terrorism is one of America's and the UN's strategies to oppress and control the Jews. People believe that the Fulani herdsmen, Boko Haram, and ISIS are terrorist groups fighting for Islamic beliefs. All terrorist organizations around the world are fighting America's indirect wars. No government can defeat terrorism because those who are helping to fight it are the same people who created and sponsored it. Former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said, "The truth is there is no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. Any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there is a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an identified entity representing the devil only in order to drive TV watchers to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. The country behind this propaganda is the US, United States of America." What does Robin Cook mean when he said, "to drive TV watchers to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism"? We will talk about that on another topic. Mr. Robin Cook revealed that there's no such thing as natural acts of terrorism, and that the acts of terrorism around the world are created by the American government to manipulate the public to accept the idea of a new world order. It's important to mention that Robin Cook was found dead 1 week after he gave this speech. Former Soviet Union leader Joseph Stalin stated that the easiest way to gain control of a population is to carry out acts of terror. America and the United Nations created terrorist groups around the world, including Boko Haram and Fulani herdsmen, to further their plans for a new world order. The effects of terrorism have further enslaved the Jews by causing poverty, insecurity, inflation, homelessness, joblessness, and food scarcity around the world. Have you ever wondered why the Amnesty International is always dragging the Nigerian government to International Court, ICC, for violating the right of Boko Haram? Have you ever wondered why the Nigerian government always release captured Boko Haram members? Have you ever wondered why the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is always pressuring the Nigerian government to devalue the naira? The reasons for these pressures are to destroy the naira, create inflation, promote poverty, and to further the plans for the New World Order. The prophecies stated that they will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine or olive oil, nor any calves of your herds or lambs of your flocks. The prophecy also stated that they will besiege, surround, all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. America and the United Nations is using these terror groups to destroy Nigeria and other nations around the world. Boko Haram, herdsmen, ISIS, Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups are fighting the American and UN's proxy wars. These prophecies are still in fulfillment today. The utter destruction of farms, homes, and the forced displacement of Jews in southern Nigeria are all fulfillments of prophecies. The prophecies stated that, "Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other." We have also learned about this prophecy. The prophecy stated that, "Among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread, fear, both night and day, never sure of your life. Let's look at the key phrases from the prophecy once again. Among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread both night and day, never sure of your life. These prophecies stated that Jews will never find peace of mind in the nations where they are scattered, and their hearts will be afflicted with anxiety, depression and misery. This prophecy also means that the Jews would be given anxious and desperate mind. They will never be contented with whatever they have, or whatever situation they find themselves, and they will keep looking for something better, even if it is unnecessary. These prophecies are consistent with Jewish patterns of behavior, especially among Jews in Nigeria and Africa, which is now known as the Japa syndrome. The Jews are a people that are never satisfied with what they have, always complaining and fleeing to other countries for greener pastures. Desperation have made many Jews to abandon respectable jobs and relocate abroad to do menial jobs such as caregivers at old people's home, washing dishes, toilets, and dead bodies. Many Jews have drowned in the seas and died on the deserts in the desperate attempt to cross into other countries. The prophecies stated that, "In the morning you will say, if only it were evening. And in the evening, if only it were morning. Because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see." The prophecies were fulfilled when the Jews were maltreated in the Americas. The Jews endured great deal of pains and mistreatment at the hands of their slave masters. The prophecy stated that, "The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again." We learned earlier that the prophecy did not refer to the physical land of Egypt. We also learned earlier that the fulfillment of this prophecy had two parts. The first part is that the houses whom the Jews coexist with are ancient Egyptians. The second part is America. The Pyramid of Giza is symbolized on America's $1. The obelisk pillar is also carried to America. The prophetic destruction of the Jews. The prophecies stated that, "All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees He gave you. They will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever." The prophecy also says, "Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please Him to ruin and destroy you." Moses warned the Israelites that if they ignored God's commandments and His decrees, they will be destroyed. Moses also warned the Israelites that God's curses would not only fall on them, but also on their children forever. Moses also stated that the curses would serve as a permanent sign to the Israelites. God warned the Israelites that He would ruin and destroy them if they ignored His commandments and decrees. We will focus on the Jews because we are talking about them right now. How did God ruin or destroy the Jews? For us to understand how God destroyed the Jewish people, we must first understand what destroy means. Destroy means to end the existence of something, to destroy or ruin someone emotionally and spiritually. The Jewish people's values and uniqueness were as follows before the destruction of the Jewish temple and their scattering abroad. The skin color and Hebrew identity. Living in the Promised Land. The national identity of the Jews as the nation of Judah, a chosen people of God, the Jewish temple and Judaism religious customs. The Hebrew names and language. The Sabbath day observance. The religious holidays. Jewish historical and religious literacy. The Jewish calendar. Before being expelled from Israel and scattered abroad, the Jews served as the world's historical reference, and their calendar established the world's time and seasons. There's an old saying that if you seek to destroy a people, take away the core values, and they will be difficult to recognize after some time. In other words, if you destroy the core values that give people a unique identity, they will become invincible, even in their own eyes. Israel and Judah experienced the same thing after their expulsion from Israel and scattered to the Middle East, Africa, and the diaspora. The skin color of Israelites and Jews. As we learned in Lost Jews Part 1, God and Adam had clay skin color while Jesus had brown skin color. The Jews lost the true skin color to identify with Jesus when the Europeans stole their identity as God's people. We also learned that Noah was the first albino, and he had 3 sons with 3 different skin colors. Japhet was a slight albino, Shem was light brown and Ham was dark brown. The modern identities of the descendants of Noah are as follows. The Japhetic people are the Caucasians, which are the Europeans and Asians. The Semitic people have light brown skin color. The Hamites have dark brown skin color. Jesus, the Israelites and Jews have the light brown skin color. Prophecy says, I said I would scatter them and erase their name, Israel, from human memory, Deuteronomy 32:26. What does the above verse mean? God promised to scatter and erase Israel from mankind's memories. It also implies that the Israelites and Jews will be forgotten by the world. Part of the punishment for Israelites and Jews' disobedience would be that the world would forget about them, as they would no longer be identified by the names of Israel or Judah, the promised land, or as God's chosen people. The prophecy of Maccabees stated that, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. Maccabees 3:48. This prophecy stated that a group of non-Hebrew people will paint themselves into the Holy Scriptures. In the 14th century, Europeans painted themselves into the Holy Scriptures by painting God and Jesus as white skin, and many people have since believed that Jesus and the Hebrews are Caucasians. And both God and Jesus have white skin. Living on the promised land. The prophecy stated that, you will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess. The prophecy also stated that, I will scatter them, Israelites and the Jews, into corners, I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. Deuteronomy 32:26. We have already learned about this prophecy earlier. According to prophecies, both the Israelites and the Jews would be uprooted, implying that they will be removed from the promised land if they ignored God's commandments. And neither the Israelites nor the Jews would ever return to the land of Israel or be identified by the name, Israel, as a people. This prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD, when the Roman soldiers destroyed the second Jewish temple and drove the Jews from the promised land to West Africa. Until Jesus returns, the Jews will never be able to claim or settle in the land of Israel. The citizens of the nation of Israel and Judah would have been better way to describe the Israelites and the Jews. The Jews today are identified by the names of the nations to which they have been scattered. But the Jews are today known as Nigerians, Liberians, Togolese, Gambians, Senegalese, Ivorians, Angolans, and Congolese, as well as Americans and Jamaicans, etc. A chosen and holy people of God. It was written, you are standing here in order to enter into a covenant with the Lord your God, a covenant the Lord is making with you this day and sealing with an oath, to confirm you this day as his people, that he may be your God as he promised you and as he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Deuteronomy 29:12-14. It was also written, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 7:6-11. The verses above illustrate how God established his covenant with Israel. This covenant elevated the Israelites to the status of God's special people while also confirming God to be the God. God separated the Israelites and Jews from all other countries and peoples on earth, anointed them as his holy people and elevated them above all others. The book of Esdras chapter 2 gave detailed accounts of God's frustration and disappointment with the Jews for continuing to worship other gods. The Lord's word came to me, saying, Go your way and show my people their sinful deeds, and their children their wickedness which they have done against me, that they may tell their children's children, because the sins of their fathers have increased in them, for they have forgotten me, and have offered sacrifices to foreign gods. Didn't I bring them out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage? But they have provoked me to wrath and have despised my counsels. How long shall I endure them, to whom I have done so much good? I have overthrown many kings for their sakes. I have struck down Pharaoh with his servants and all his army. I have destroyed all the nations before them. Speak therefore to them, saying, The Lord says, Truly I brought you through the sea, and where there was no path, I made highways for you. I gave you light in a pillar of fire. I have done great wonders among you, yet you have forgotten me, says the Lord. The Lord Almighty says, The quails were for a token to you. I gave you a camp for your protection, but you complained there. You didn't celebrate in my name for the destruction of your enemies, but even to this day you still complain. Where are the benefits that I have given you? I divided fruitful lands among you. I drove out the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and the Philistines before you. What more shall I do for you? Says the Lord. What shall I do to you, O Jacob? You, Judah, would not obey me. We can clearly see God's anger, disappointment and frustration towards the Jews because of the disobedience, ungratefulness and constant disregard for his commandments. God revealed that despite several undeserved blessings, victories, and favors bestowed upon the Jews, they never showed gratefulness. Instead they fled to worship false gods. Verses 24 and 25 stated that, I will turn myself to other nations, and I will give my name to them, that they may keep my statutes. Since you have forsaken me, I also will forsake you. Actions speak louder than words. Although Israel and Judah never verbally rejected God, but they did so by their actions in disobeying his commandments. God will treat the Jews just as they treated him, and since they rejected him, he will also reject them. God did not completely reject the Israelites and Jews, but he temporarily removed the special privileges that had made them special nations and people. The covenant that God made with Israel would also be extended to the Gentiles and pagan nations. The parable of the wedding feast was used to illustrate how the Jews rejected God and how God extended his covenant to other nations. Matthew 22, 2-3 stated that, The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Matthew 22, 2-3. So, go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So, the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend? The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, Tie him hand and foot, and throw him outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 22, 9-13. The interpretations of the key phrases in this parable are as follows. The king is God. The wedding banquet symbolized the kingdom of God through Calvary. The Son is Jesus. The servants are God's messengers, the prophets, evangelists and pastors. The invited guest who refused to honor the occasion were the Israelites and the Jews. The invited, good and bad guest from the streets are the Gentile and pagan nations. The wedding clothes symbolized God's commandments and his righteousness. The Israelites and the Jews were originally invited to receive God's salvation, but they rejected it by rejecting Jesus and his Calvary sacrifice. So, for this reason, God extended the salvation invitation to the Gentile and pagan nations, as well as anyone that would be interested. Apostle Paul is known as the Apostle to the Gentiles because he only preached to the Gentile nations. The Gentile people in the Bible are the Europeans and Asians. Romans chapter 1 revealed Paul's conversations to the Europeans, the Gentile people. Paul said, "I am not ashamed of the gospel, salvation for the Jews first, then the Gentiles." Romans 1:16. Paul made it clear to the Europeans, to the Gentiles, that salvation was originally for the Jews before it was extended to them. John also wrote about the salvation of the Gentiles. He said, "But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become the children of God." John 1:12. The above verse eliminated the Israelites and the Jews' right to be God's only people. The verse further eliminated the Jews and Israelites' claims to be the only chosen people of God. The verse invited anyone who would believe and accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. The chosen people of God would now be referred to as everyone who would follow the commandments of God and worship Him faithfully through Jesus Christ. God said to prophet Esdras in Esdras chapter 2, "I will turn myself to other nations, and I will give my name to them, that they may keep my statutes." The Gentiles Christians are Christians by spiritual adoption. Though the Israelites and Jews are Jacob's bloodline, the Gentile Christians have the right to bear the name Israel because Jesus is also a descendant of Jacob, an Israelite. Jeremiah stated that, "Therefore, this is what the Lord says, I will bring on them, the Jews, a disaster they cannot escape. Although they cry out to me, I will not listen to them." Jeremiah 11:11. Judaism died a natural death when the Jews arrived in Africa, when they abandoned it and turned to idolatry. At first, the Jews didn't understand that Calvary had replaced the Judaism. That was why they continued to practice it, even after the death of Jesus. It's natural for the Jews to try to reconnect with God when they arrived in Africa, but He won't listen to their prayers because they were prayed to Him through the wrong way, through Judaism. It was this spiritual emptiness that led them to idolatry. The Hebrew names. The prophecy stated that, "Let them be scattered abroad among the heathen, let the names be put out of the earth, for they have despised my covenant." Esdras 2:7. The key phrase here is, "Let the names be put out of the earth." This statement implied that the ancient Hebrew names of the Israelites and Jewish people would be lost or forgotten forever. As we previously learned in the study, American records revealed that the Jews had ancient Hebrew names before they were carried from West Africa to the Americas. The Jews carried to the Americas and Europe were forced to abandon their Hebrew names and adopted the names of their slave masters. The remnant Jews in Africa adopted Islamic names, English names, French names, Portuguese names, and named themselves after the gods they worshipped. The Jewish calendar and religious holidays. Once the Jewish temple was destroyed and the holy books lost, their religious holidays were effectively destroyed and forgotten forever. Speaking of the Hebrew calendar, the world is currently using the Gregorian calendar, but before it, the world used the Julian calendar. The Julian calendar was proposed by Julius Caesar in 46 BC and was put into use on January 1, 45 BC. Pope Gregory XIII officially introduced the Gregorian calendar to the Catholic Church as the church official calendar in 1582 because the Julian calendar was becoming inaccurate, especially in the calculation of the date of Easter, which was moving away from the spring equinox on March 21. The Gregorian calendar was adopted by Catholic countries around the world. However, initially there were issues with its adoption elsewhere, with Protestants rejecting it because they considered it a Catholic Church plot to silence their movement. And before this, the English New Year began on March 25, but eventually Protestant countries accepted the new system by the 1700s, with Great Britain and its colonies adopting it in 1752. Which calendar did God give the ancient Israelites? Exodus 12:2 stated that, "This month is to be the first month of the year for you." It signifies the beginning of a new calendar for the Israelites, with this month becoming the starting point of the yearly reckoning. This is the month in which they would celebrate Passover and commemorate their liberation from Egypt. Which month was God referring to as the beginning of a new calendar for the Israelites here? Exodus 13, 3-4 stated that, "So Moses told the people, remember this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for the Lord brought you out of it by the strength of his hand. And nothing leavened shall be eaten. Today, in the month of Abib, you are leaving." The key phrase here is, today, in the month of Abib. Which month is the month of Abib? The month of Abib is also known as Nisan, and it's the first month of the ancient Jewish calendar. The month of Nisan begins from March to April in the Gregorian calendar. The Hebrew New Year celebration should be in March and not on 1st of January as the Jews celebrate it today. The calendar that God gave to Enoch, and later to the ancient Israelites, and the Gregorian calendar that we use today are not the same. The Hebrew calendar has 354 days and is calculated by the rotation of the moon, which is called the lunar. The Gregorian calendar is 365 days and is calculated by the rotation of the sun, often known as the solar. The difference between the two calendars is 11 days. The Gregorian calendar is used by the lost Jews to determine times and celebrate holidays. This calendar has also influenced the true age of the Jews. In God's eyes, they are much younger than they claim to be. If you factor in the 11 days discrepancy between these two calendars, you will notice you are much younger than you think. For example, if you are 40 years old according to the Gregorian calendar, your true age using the Hebrew calendar would be 39 years and 2 months old, a difference of about 14 months. The Hebrew language. The Hebrew language is part of the Jewish identity. The whole Jewish communities in West and Central Africa speaks Pidgin Hebrew. Before we begin to discuss the Hebrew language in Africa, let's talk about the languages that were spoken in Jewish communities before they were carried to the Americas and Europe. Alauda revealed the following in his book. Alauda wrote that, "Although I was a great many days' journey from my father's house, yet these people spoke exactly the same language with us. From the time I left my own nation I always found somebody that understood me till I came to the seacoast." The languages of different nations did not totally differ, nor were they so copious, many, as those of the Europeans, particularly the English. The language of these people resembled ours so nearly, that we understood each other perfectly, and they had also the very same customs as we. While I was in this astonishment, one of my fellow prisoners spoke to a countryman of his about the horses, who said they were the same kind they had in their country. I understood them, though they were from a distant part of Africa. All the nations and people I had hitherto passed through resembled our own in their manners, customs, and language. As mentioned before, Alauda was caught by African slave traders, who eventually carried him through several African states until he arrived in Central Africa and then was shipped to England. Alauda confirmed that the West African countries he passed through spoke the same language. Alauda also confirmed that all the slaves carried to the Americas spoke the same language. The Jews carried abroad were forced to abandon Hebrew and they spoke English, Portuguese, and French. First, it's important to state the fact that modern Israel don't speak ancient Hebrew. Yiddish is the language spoken by the false Israelites living in Israel today. Yiddish is a West Germanic language historically spoken by the Ashkenazi Jews. It originated in the 9th century Central Europe, and many Ashkenazi Jews who immigrated to Israel in the early 20th century currently speak Yiddish as their primary language. I stumbled into a publication that was advertised on YouTube. The publication was made by Prince Oladipo Jajelola. The publication is known as Orion, commonly pronounced as Arisen, a Yoruba word that means the source or the spring or the beginning, and the true identity of the Yorubas and their neighbors. In his publication, Prince Jajelola maintained that the Yorubas, other southern Nigerian tribes, and West Africans are Israelites. and that their indigenous or native dialects originated from the ancient Hebrew language. Prince Jajelola wrote that, "I was later compelled by an inner drive to reach deeper for the Hebrew Torah to distinguish myself from an ordinary Bible reader. That led me into the personal study of the modern Hebrew language, which I later discovered was created roughly 200 years ago. On this note, I dropped the modern Hebrew for the ancient Hebrew Torah." After proper study of the alphabets with the correlating English alphabets, I moved on to the book of Genesis, the first chapter and the first verse. I wrote out the alphabets as grouped together in the Torah and checked for their corresponding meaning in English language. It was then that the light of this understanding struck me. He said that the Torah he read was fake because it lacked the authentic Hebrew texts and was written approximately 200 years ago. This information is totally accurate, but I will not go into much detail about it right now. The modern Torah and the practice of Judaism by the fake Israelites is known as Kabbalah, and it's satanic. Jesus said, "I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not but are a synagogue of Satan." Revelation 2:9. Jesus called fake Jews a synagogue of Satan in reference to the religion they practice. Prince Jajelola said, "If these group of consonants are properly vowelized, they will generate Yoruba words which retain the information the English-speaking Torah professional have attributed to them." Prince Jajelola explained that he replaced the fake Hebrew Torah with the authentic one to get accurate interpretations. The following are what he learned from the original Torah. He explained that, if consonants words are properly vowelized, they will generate Yoruba words. The truth is always consistent, regardless of who tells it. I've never met Prince Jajelola, and his work is completely independent of mine. We spoke over the phone when I placed an online order for his magazine. I only found 2 errors in this magazine. First, he referred to everyone in Western Nigeria as Yorubas. Not everybody in Western region are Yorubas, only those who are related to Adudwa by blood are Yorubas. Secondly, he referred the southern Nigerians and the countries in West and Central Africa as Israelites, but they are Jews. Israel is the umbrella name for the 12 tribes of Israel, but God later divided them into 2 different nations which were nations of Israel and Judah. The combined tribes of Judah, Levi and Benjamin formed the nation of Judah and are known as Jews. Prince Jajelola explained that, if these group of consonants are properly vowelized, they will generate Yoruba words which retain the information the English-speaking Torah professionals have attributed to them. What does consonants and vowel mean? Consonant is defined as a basic speech sound in which the breath is at least partly obstructed, and which can be combined with a vowel to form a syllable. Syllable is defined as part of a word that contains a single vowel sound and that is pronounced as a unit. For example, books have 1 syllable and reading has 2 syllables. We see a pictography table for oral sound representation, and the table reveals how the Hebrew letters and oral sound correlates with English letter. In a nutshell, the prince explained that the dialects of the Yoruba, Igbo, Edo and other ethnic groups in southern Nigeria and the countries in West and Central Africa originated from the ancient Hebrew language. In other words, if the dialects of these countries are properly vowelized, they will generate a proper Hebrew language. The perfect illustration of how vowelized words would generate a proper Hebrew word can be found in Prince Jajelola's magazine Ariran, which translates to the source. Arisen is translated as the source in Yoruba dialect. When the Yoruba word was properly vowelized, it created the Hebrew word Ariran rather than Arisen, as the Yorubas say it, which is wrong. Another source also confirmed Prince Oladipo Jajelola's claim. Tudor Parfit is a professor of modern Jewish studies in the University of London at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS. He's a British historian, writer, broadcaster, traveler and adventurer who specializes in the study of Jewish communities and Judaizing communities around the world, particularly in Africa, Asia and the Americas. Tudor Parfit, in his book Black Jews in Africa and the Americas, he wrote about the languages that are spoken in some African countries. Tudor stated that, often colonial officials and missionaries imagined that various African languages were connected with Hebrew, Aramaic and other Semitic tongues, and frequently they would maintain that they derived directly from Hebrew. Such identifications were made out of a genuine desire to comprehend the seemingly impenetrable customs, religions, and languages encountered on the colonial frontier. Ethnographers, missionaries, colonial civil servants, and travelers time and time again maintained that African tribes, including the ex-Hassa, Masi, Yoruba, Shona, Igbo, Zulus, Hottentots, Tutsis, Ashanti, and many more, practiced Jewish customs, spoke partially Jewish languages, and were of Jewish biological origin, the seed of Abraham. This is an information from a British professor, an independent source who made his research and concluded that the above tribes in Africa are bloodline Hebrew people, and that their local dialects were derived from the ancient Hebrew language. This is not like an African man trying to claim or be what he's not. Tudor Parfit's statement also confirmed Prince Jagelola's theory. One of the key phrases in Tudor Parfit's book is, "They spoke partially Jewish languages." According to Tudor Parfit, partial or small Hebrew is contained or found in the dialects of the above-mentioned countries. The local dialect spoken in Jewish communities in Africa is what I call Pidgin Hebrew. Pidgin is defined as a simplified form of a language used for communication for easy understanding. Several languages in the world, including English, Dutch, or Portuguese, all have Pidgin versions of their original languages. I will use English as an example for easy understanding and because it is a general spoken language. Proper spoken English. Pidgin English version. Who is here? Who dey here? Get out of the road. Come out for road. I will fight you. I go fight you. Who is this? Who be this? Just to mention a few examples. We can see that there is not much difference between proper spoken English and spoken Pidgin English. So, it is with ancient Hebrew language and native dialects spoken in the above-mentioned countries, including the entire southern Nigeria. The dialects spoken in the southern Nigeria, including Benue and Kogi states, and Cameroon, and from Benin Republic to Senegal, Central and South Africa originated from the ancient Hebrew language. How did Jews lose their ability to speak proper Hebrew language? We must try to create a scenario of how the Americans invaded Africa and conquered the Jews. It's natural and expected of the Jews to resist arrest and defend their land with spears, arrows, and cutlasses when the Americans invaded Africa, but the Americans would overpower them because of their superior weapons like guns. The prophecy stated that, "The Lord will bring a fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young." Deuteronomy 28, 49-50. Approximately 12.5 million Jews were captured and carried to the Americas, and about 2 million of them died on the ship. Most of the captured Jews were adults, young people, and a few children. Many adult Jews that were not captured were wounded and left to die. According to America's transatlantic slave records, most of the Jews that were captured and carried to the Americas were adults and young people, with few children, including children of 2 and 3 years. If the elderly and young Jews were carried away, we can only imagine how young the Jews who remained in Africa would be. The Jews that escaped slavery were relatively young and lacked the ability to accurately speak Hebrew. The children left behind in Africa ranged around ages from 1 to 15 years old and could barely speak Hebrew perfectly at the time. If the remaining Jews couldn't speak Hebrew perfectly back then, we can only imagine how unorganized the Hebrew language would be after almost 400 years. We see a perfect example of evolution in the Yoruba language, with words such as Japa, which means escape or run away, and Buga, which means to intimidate. These are not proper Yoruba words, but are slangs created from Yoruba words. To communicate, the remnant Jews in various parts of Africa developed their own dialects from the Hebrew they barely understood. This explains why the dialects of different Jewish communities are similar, as mentioned by Tudor Parfit in his book. The dialects retain similar words, but they are pronounced differently, and they have different meanings. The Levi and Judah's communities, now known as the Yoruba and Igbo people, are perfect examples of dialect similarities. Here are some common Yoruba and Igbo words. Common words. Yoruba dialect. Igbo dialect. Ada means cutlass in Yoruba and name in Igbo dialect. Iwe means book in Yoruba and anger in Igbo dialect. Ara means wonder in Yoruba and madness in Igbo dialect. Enu means mouth in Yoruba and up in Igbo dialect. Oge means fashion or fashionable in Yoruba and time in Igbo dialect. Oku means the dead in Yoruba and word in Igbo dialect. Examples of similarities between Yoruba and Igbo dialects continues. Jide means name and come early in Yoruba and to hold in Igbo dialect. Obi means parent and coconut in Yoruba and king, heart and name in Igbo dialect. Ife means love and trophy in Yoruba and an item in Igbo dialect. Anu means mercy in Yoruba and meat or beef in Igbo dialect. We notice the same words but with different pronunciations and meanings. The Yoruba, Igbo, and southern Nigerian dialects, including Kogi and Benue states, as well as those of other West and Central African countries, speak Pidgin Hebrew as a result of missing vowels and consonants in Hebrew language. These dialects lack the necessary vowel and consonant sounds to make an understandable Hebrew language. If you listen to the spoken dialects of many tribes in southern Nigeria and West Africa, you are likely to hear words from your own dialect. The prophecy stated that, "You will become a thing of horror, a byword and an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you." Deuteronomy 28:37. Byword is defined as an object of general reproach, derision, scorn, etc. Earlier in our study, we learned that Simeon from the Bible was referred to as a nigger, referring to nigger, which is a Greek word for brown or black. The Jews became to be known as nigger. Nigger is a disrespectful term for those with brown or dark skin. Nigger or Negro is a word used to mock the Jews. The Sabbath day worship. What did God say about the Sabbath day? The Bible stated that, "And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation." Genesis 2:3. The Bible also stated that, "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy." Exodus 20:8. The Bible also stated that, "Then the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so you may know that I am the Lord, who makes you holy." Exodus 31:12-13. The Bible also stated that, "And I gave them my Sabbath days rest as a sign between them and me." It was to remind them that I am the Lord, who had set them apart to be holy. Ezekiel 20:12. The Sabbath day commandment refers to the seventh day of the week, where God rested from his work after creation. The last day of the week is a topic of controversy, but I will talk about it a little because it is relevant to the identity and culture of both Israelites and Jews. Many people, particularly Christians, believe that because they worship on Sunday it is the biblical day of worship sanctioned by God, but it's not true. Which day is the first day of the week? Sunday is the first day of the week while Saturday is the last day of the week. This makes the Sabbath day to be on a Saturday. Today, the Jews are scattered to all corners of the world. Only a few Jews honor the fourth commandment by keeping the Sabbath day, Saturday, holy. Though the Jews were driven from Israel, but they didn't forget their Sabbath day worship tradition. The incident involving the Portuguese king and the Jews in São Tomé and Príncipe revealed the type of religion the Jews practiced before and after they arrived in Africa. The nautical magazine of 14th and this history was also confirmed by Wikipedia. History stated that, similarly, a number of Portuguese ethnic Jews were exiled to São Tomé after forced conversions to Roman Catholicism. From São Tomé and by other means groups of Jews settled down the west coast of Africa, as far south as Loango. Here, we are informed that the Jews were expelled from Portugal to São Tomé and Príncipe because they refused to convert to Roman Catholicism. Nautical magazine also stated that King Manuel I of Portugal exiled about 2,000 Jewish children under the age of 10, to São Tomé and Príncipe around 1500. Most died, but in the early 17th century the local bishop noted with disgust that there were still Jewish observances on the island and returned to Portugal because of his frustration with them. In the late 14th century, Jews were exiled from Portugal to São Tomé and Príncipe and the Loango region because they were mulattoes, meaning half-castes, and opposed or rejected Roman Catholicism. But something interesting happened in the 17th century. Historical sources stated that, but in the early 17th century, the local bishop noted with disgust that there were still Jewish observances on the island and returned to Portugal because of his frustration with them. A Catholic bishop from Portugal was sent to São Tomé and Príncipe to investigate whether the Jews had converted to Christianity after 200 years of exile, but the Catholic bishop was surprised to learn that the Jews continued to practice the Jewish beliefs, including the Sabbath day worship. The bishop returned to Portugal, frustrated that the Catholic Church had failed to convert Jews in the region to Catholicism. Alauda also confirmed the day of worship for Jews during the slavery period. Alauda wrote that, on the 5th of January, we made Antigua and Montserrat and ran along the rest of the islands, and on the 14th we arrived at Jamaica. One Sunday while we were there, I took the Mosquito Prince George to church. In another incident, he also wrote that, then, said he, when were you brought to the knowledge of God? And how were you convinced of sin? I knew not what he meant by these questions. I told him I kept 8 commandments out of 10, but that I sometimes swore on board ship, and sometimes went on shore, and broke the Sabbath. In another incident, he wrote that, this vexed me much, not knowing how to act, and I lost some time in seeking after this Christian, and though, when the Sabbath came, which the Negroes usually make their holiday, I was much inclined to go to public worship. In the first quote, Alauda mentioned that he took his slave master to church on Sunday. According to Alauda's second quote, while discussing sins with his slave master, Alauda informed his master that he sometimes broke the Sabbath commandment because he needed to be on the sea. According to Alauda's third quote, he referred to a white man as Christians, implying that Christianity was the white man's religion at the time. Alauda further revealed that the Sabbath was a holiday for the Negro Jews. The slave masters knew that the slaves they took from Africa to the Americas were Jews, and they also understood that Sabbath day worship or rest was part of their culture, so they gave them that day, the Sabbath day, as a day of rest, as commanded by God in the Bible. Why would the Jews observe the Sabbath on Saturday in the Americas if they didn't already observe the Sabbath in Africa before they were carried away as slaves? This just confirmed that Sabbath worship was observed in Africa before they were carried to the Americas. The Gentile slave masters mentioned in the Bible ultimately compelled the Jews to accept Eurocentric Christianity, which acknowledges Sunday as a day of rest and worship. The remnant Jews in Africa had already begun to worship idols, but most of them later converted to Islam and westernized or Eurocentric Christianity. The Jews rejected the original Christianity day of worship which advocated for Sabbath Saturday observance, and they accepted the Eurocentric Christianity that had been altered and repackaged through theology. Sunday as a day of worship and rest is entirely unbiblical. Most Christians do not seem to understand the differences between the Ten Commandments and the temple laws. The death of Jesus put an end to temple activities, including its ceremonial laws, which explains why the temple curtain was split in two, symbolizing its irrelevance. The Ten Commandments are different from the ceremonial laws. The Sabbath commandment is one of the 10 moral and everlasting commandments, while the temple laws are ceremonial and temporal. Let's read what the Catholic Church has to say about the observation of Sunday as the holy day of rest. The Catholic Church said, "We observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church, in the Council of Laodicea, A.D. 364, transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday." Peter Geiermann, CSSR, The Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, page 50, 3rd edition, 1957. "We, the Catholic Church, hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." Encyclical letter by Pope Leo XIII, June 20, 1894. The Roman Catholic Church claims to be the first church established by Jesus, which is untrue. The Catholic Church claims that it has the moral authority to amend any of God's commandments in the Bible. The Sabbath commandment is one of the 10 commandments. It is everlasting and unchangeable. Christianity is an advancement or improvement from Judaism. Christianity originated from Judaism. All the temple sacrificial activities pointed to the appearance and death of Jesus. The death of Jesus replaced the sacrificial activities in the temple. The temple curtain was split into two because there was no need for it again. The activities of the temple symbolized the coming of Jesus, so everything about the temple became meaningless after his death. The symbol of Israel. Most nations are represented by symbols. A country's symbols can be an animal, a tool, an object, a leaf, and so on. Most countries use emblems as symbols of sovereignty on their flags. Examples of such countries include the European Union using stars, Canada using a leaf, and Saudi Arabia using a sword to represent their sovereignty. What was the symbol of ancient Israel? The Bible will tell us what the symbol of ancient Israel was. The Bible stated that, "Then make it 7 lamps and set them up on it so that they light the space in front of it." Exodus 25:37. The Bible stated that, "As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." Revelations 1:20. We see the connection between the earthly tabernacle and the heavenly sanctuary. The 7 golden lampstand is known as the menorah. The menorah was the symbol of ancient Israel and the Jewish people. Menorah is Hebrew word for lamp, and it has 7 branches. The menorah was used as symbol of first and second Jewish temples, and there is archaeological evidence to support this fact. In 81 AD, Emperor Titus created a sculpture depicting the Jews carrying the menorah after they were expelled from Israel to West Africa in 70 AD. We can see the menorah in the yellow circle. The menorah and the Hanukkah are not the same. The menorah and the Hanukkah look alike, but they are not the same. The Jewish menorah only has 7 lamps. But the Hanukkah has a symbol of the hexagram on it. The fake Jews used Hanukkah to replace the menorah as the symbol of Israel. The Hanukkah day is celebrated in Israel, America and Europe on the 25th of December. What does the Bible say about the hexagram symbol? Amos recorded the following concerning the idolatry of Israel. He said, "You have taken along Sakuth your king and Kiwan your star god, the idols you made for yourselves." Amos 5:26. Stephen, while condemning the Sanhedrin for the disbelief, also criticized the Jews' idolatry. He said, "You have taken up the tabernacle of Molech and the star of your god Rephan, the idols you made to worship. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Babylon." Act 743. It's evident that the symbol of star god or the hexagram has nothing to do with God and his people. What does the word hexagram mean? The word hex itself tells us everything about the symbol. Hex means to cast a spell on or to bewitch somebody or something. Hexagram is a satanic symbol. The hexagram is a six-pointed star used to conjure evil spirits or demons. God, Judaism and Christianity cannot have anything to do with such symbol. The present-day Israel use the hexagram as its national symbol on their flag. Modern Israel claim the hexagram is the Star of David, but it's a lie and it has nothing to do with King David or the Bible. Ignorant Christians adopted this lie and displayed the modern Israel's flag, which carried the hexagram symbol, in their churches and homes, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with God, the Bible, or King David. In 1948, when the present state of Israel was created, the Ashkenazi Jews who now live in Israel adopted the hexagram as their symbol of sovereignty. The prophecy stated that, "All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. These curses, will be a sign and a wonder to you and your descendants forever." Deuteronomy 28, 45-46. Just as it was prophesied, the Israelites and the Jews have been destroyed beyond recognition. Despite abundance of biblical and historical evidence that strongly supports your Jewishness, I am sure many of you are still having difficulty to accept the fact that you are the true bloodline Jews, the direct descendants of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. That is how destroyed we are. Calculation of the 400 years slavery punishment. Then the Lord said to him, "Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." Genesis 15:12-14. Most historians, including America, agreed that the transatlantic slave trade began in August 1619. August 1619 was the year the first set of Jews landed in America. If we apply mathematics using the modern calendar, it means that the slavery punishment would have ended in 2019. The prophecy stated that, "But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." We have passed the year 2019 but nothing has happened. Why? If we adopt the Gregorian calendar, a Gentile calendar established in 1582, the 400-year slavery period would have ended in 2019, but God would never keep track of his prophecies and activities through a Gentile or man-made calendar. The Hebrew calendar that God gave to Enoch and the Gregorian calendar that we use today are not the same. The Hebrew calendar has 354 days and is calculated by the rotation of the moon, which is called the lunar. The Gregorian calendar is 365 days and is calculated by the rotation of the sun, often known as the solar. The difference between the two calendars is 11 days. Let's reapply mathematics again. Calculation of the 400 years slave punishment with Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar is as follows. Hebrew calendar, the lunar, is 354 days. The Gregorian calendar, the solar, is 365 days. The difference is 11 days. The transatlantic slave trade began in 1619. Slavery punishment to last for 400 years. The calculation for the end of slavery punishment is as follows. As per Gregorian calendar, year 2021 subtracted by 1619 is equal to 402 years, which ended in 2019. Kindly note that I made this article and did this calculation in 2021. Calculation with Hebrew calendar. Add back the extra 11 days from the Gregorian calendar, which is 11 days multiplied by 400 years equals 4,400 days. Therefore, 4,400 days are divided by 365 days equals 12 years, 4 months, and some days. Add back the already used 402 years, up to 2021, plus 12 years and 4 months, missing from the Gregorian calendar, making a total of 414 years. The current year 2021 plus 12 and a half years, or approximately 13 years, equals 2034. If the number of days of the Hebrew calendar is accurate, it means the 400 years Jewish slavery punishment would end by the year 2034. What will happen when the 400 years slavery punishment ends? This is discussion for another day. The end.
There are no more articles to read.